High above the swirling clouds, where the air grows thin and the condors soar, stretch the ancient spine of the Andes Mountains. It's a landscape of breathtaking beauty and brutal challenge, a place where sheer cliffs defy the sky and deep valleys carve through the earth. And here, etched into this impossible terrain, lies one of history's most enigmatic marvels, a web of roads so vast it could wrap around our entire planet, built by a civilization that achieved the seemingly unachievable. How did an empire without the wheel, without iron tools, and without a written language construct a 25,000-mile road network across the most treacherous landscapes on Earth, a system so advanced it puts many of our modern highways to shame? This is the quiet, profound mystery that calls to us across the centuries, and welcome to a journey into the calm yet awe-inspiring history of Inca engineering. Before we begin our exploration, we'd love to feel a sense of connection with you wherever you are in the world. As you settle in to explore this story of ancient ambition, let us know in the comments below where you're joining us from tonight and what time your own journey into rest and discovery begins. It's a wonderful way to share in this experience together, a reminder that stories of human ingenuity connect us all, no matter the distance. This monumental achievement is known as the Qhapaq Ñan, the Great Inca Road. More than just a simple path, it was the lifeblood of the largest empire in the pre-Columbian Americas, a breathtaking network of highways that bound together mountains, deserts, and jungles into a single, cohesive realm. To understand the Inca road system is to understand a philosophy of power, connection, and harmony with the natural world that remains deeply impressive even today. It stands as one of history's greatest architectural mysteries, not just for its sheer scale, but for the profound ingenuity required to bring it into existence against all odds. Over the course of our journey, we will walk these ancient paths, uncovering the secrets of their construction, the minds of their builders, and the legacy they left behind, a testament to what humanity can accomplish with observation, perseverance, and a deep respect for the world around them. To truly grasp the scale of this engineering marvel, we need to map it out. Picture the empire of the Inca, the Tahuantinsuyu, a name meaning the four parts together. It was an immense realm, stretching over 2,500 miles down the western edge of South America, from what is now southern Colombia all the way to central Chile. And connecting these four distant quarters was the Qhapaq Ñan, a network of roads so extensive that if you could gather all its various paths and lay them out in a single line, it would be long enough to circle the entire globe. 25,000 miles of engineered roadway, all built by hand. This was far more than a collection of trails. It was the central nervous system of an empire, a breathtakingly sophisticated infrastructure project. Official messengers sprinted along its routes, relaying vital information at speeds that would rival the postal systems of 18th century Europe. Armies marched on these roads to secure distant provinces, while llamas carried everything from maize and potatoes to precious goods like gold, feathers, and textiles from one ecological zone to another. The road was the ultimate symbol of Inca power and control, the physical thread that bound the empire's diverse landscapes and peoples into a single, unified whole. The system was anchored by two magnificent main highways, running parallel to each other like twin arteries along the length of the Andes. The first was the coastal road, a marvel in its own right. While we might imagine a road along the beach, much of this route pushed through some of the most arid desert on the planet. Builders overcame this by routing the road near river valleys that cut through the dryness, creating lifelines for travel and transport between the ocean and the inland mountains. But it is the second trunk road that truly defines the Inca ambition, the high mountain road. This was the true spine of the empire, weaving through the breathtaking and brutal heights of the Andes. This road did not avoid the mountains, it conquered them. It ascended to altitudes exceeding 16,000 feet, navigating peaks that touch the clouds, skirting the edges of deep glacial valleys, and crossing passes where the air is so thin it takes your breath away. To walk this road was to journey through the very roof of the continent, a testament to the Incas' intimate relationship with the monumental landscape they called home. These two main trunks were then connected by a complex web of lateral roads, creating an integrated network that allowed the Inca state to project its power and maintain its cohesion across an empire of impossible geography. These were not simple dirt paths carved by countless footsteps over time. The Qhapaq Ñan was a feat of deliberate, sophisticated civil engineering, a planned infrastructure project on a continental scale. Each segment was meticulously designed for its specific environment and purpose, with many of the main highways constructed to a standardized width of 3 to 5 meters, wide enough for a contingent of soldiers to march in formation or for a train of laden llamas to pass comfortably. This careful zoning meant the road's character changed depending on where you were. As you approached a major administrative center or a sacred site like the capital of Cusco, the road would transform. Here, the pathways were often paved with precisely fitted stone, lined with drainage channels, and sometimes even flanked by protective walls or shaded by rows of trees, showcasing the empire's wealth and organizational power to all who entered. But travel further out into the remote highlands or the sprawling desert, and the road became more functional, though no less impressive. In these areas, the design prioritized durability and navigation over grandeur. The width might narrow, but the construction was always intentional, built to withstand the specific challenges of that locale. This variation wasn't a sign of inconsistency, it was evidence of a highly efficient and pragmatic system. The Inca engineers understood that resources were finite and that a road's form should follow its function. A wide, ornate processional way was necessary for the heart of the empire, but a sturdy, well-maintained trail was what kept the provinces connected and supplied. Beyond its physical utility, the road served a deeper, symbolic purpose. It was the ultimate manifestation of the Inca state's reach and authority. The very act of constructing such a network was a declaration of dominance over the land itself, a way of taming the untamable Andes. It physically demonstrated that the Sapa Inca's power could conquer mountains, bridge chasms, and unite a continent. For the people living within the empire, the road was a constant, tangible reminder of who was in charge. Imperial messengers, tax collectors, and armies moved along these routes, making the abstract concept of a central government a daily reality. The Qhapaq Ñan wasn't just a means of travel, it was the binding thread of the empire, weaving together countless cultures and landscapes into the four parts together. Facing the raw, jagged spine of the Andes, the Inca engineers, the Qhapaq Ñan, began their work not with resistance but with a profound understanding. They didn't seek to blast through the mountains or conquer them with brute force. Instead, they employed a philosophy of harmony, reading the land with an acuity we can scarcely imagine today, working without the wheel, iron, or even written plans. Their first and greatest challenge was to see the landscape not as an obstacle but as a partner. These master surveyors performed their analysis through generations of accumulated knowledge and meticulous observation. They likely used simple but incredibly effective tools, topos or clay models, to visualize entire valleys and peaks in miniature, and groups of stakes and cords to sight lines across vast distances, calculating grades and alignments with astonishing accuracy. They thought in 4 dimensions, planning not just for the space a road would occupy, but for how it would behave through time, across seasons, and under the relentless forces of nature. This wisdom is most evident in their genius for route selection. Rather than plotting the most direct line between 2 points, they sought the most sustainable and efficient path. A key strategy was to route the high mountain roads along the natural spines of ridges and mountain shoulders. This offered several brilliant advantages. First, it kept the road well above the valley floors, which were not only prone to catastrophic flooding during the rainy season, but were also often densely forested, swampy, and home to disease. The higher, drier ridges provided a safer, healthier, and far more stable pathway. They also integrated existing animal trails into their network, particularly those made by vicuñas, whose innate sense for the most stable and navigable slopes provided a natural blueprint for the engineers. Furthermore, they considered environmental factors we might overlook. They positioned roads to maximize exposure to the warming sunlight on colder southern slopes, making winter travel more bearable, and conversely, they routed paths to take advantage of cooling wind patterns in lower, warmer valleys. Every decision, from the grand sweep of a route across a mountain face to the placement of a single step, was a calculated compromise between distance, durability, and the sheer well-being of the traveler, a testament to an engineering ethos that was as practical as it was profound. With such a sophisticated understanding of the landscape, we are left with a question that has perplexed historians and engineers for centuries. How did they physically accomplish it? The Inca toolkit was astonishingly simple, a fact that makes their monumental achievements all the more incredible. They did not have iron to forge picks and shovels, they never employed the wheel for transport, and they had no powerful beasts of burden beyond the sturdy but relatively small llama. Theirs was an engineering revolution achieved with stone and bronze. Among their most vital tools was the Qhapaq, a heavy, star-headed war club that was expertly repurposed for peace. Swung by a skilled worker, this stone hammer could fracture and shape the toughest andesite with remarkable precision. For prying and lifting, they used strong wooden levers and crowbars tipped with hardened bronze. And for the final, most meticulous work, they employed simple stone hammers and abrasives like sand and water to grind surfaces to a perfect, seamless fit. It was a technology of percussion and persuasion, not of cutting. They didn't slice through rock, they convinced it to break where they wanted through patience, skill, and an intimate knowledge of its natural fracture points. To apply this technology on a continental scale required not just tools but hands, an immense, well-organized workforce. This was provided by the mita, a rotational labor tax that was the backbone of the Inca economy. Every household across the empire owed a certain number of days each year to the state, not in currency but in work. It was a system of shared civic duty, where thousands of citizens would take turns contributing to vast public works projects, from building storehouses and temples to maintaining these great roads. Imagine the scene on a mountainside, not a scene of slave labor but of communal effort. Teams of workers, organized with military precision, would focus on specific tasks. One group would quarry stone using fire and water to heat and cool the rock, causing it to fracture. Another team would rough out the stones with their champis. The most skilled artisans would then fit them together in a process that seems almost magical. They would shape the stones by repeatedly lowering a rock onto the one below it, the impact leaving a dusty impression that showed exactly where to grind next. This iterative process, a slow, patient dance of trial and error, resulted in those iconic, interlocking joints that have withstood earthquakes for 500 years. It was a symphony of coordinated effort where the rhythmic sound of stone on stone echoed through the valleys, a testament to what a society can achieve through shared purpose and breathtaking ingenuity. But this symphony of stonework, the iconic walls and paving we can still see today, was only the final, visible layer of their genius. The true marvel, the hidden secret to the road's immortal durability, lies beneath the surface in a foundation built to last for eternity. The Inca engineers knew that a road is only as strong as the ground it rests upon, and so their first act was not to build up but to dig down. Before a single paver was set, crews would excavate a trench, sometimes as deep as a meter or more, directly into the mountainside or valley floor. This was the crucial first step in creating a stable platform known as the subgrade. into this excavated bed, they would carefully place a layer of large, fist-sized stones called the hampara. This wasn't just rubble, it was a deliberately engineered drainage layer. The gaps between these large rocks acted as a subterranean channel, allowing groundwater to flow freely underneath the road instead of pooling beneath it. In a landscape defined by torrential rainy seasons and mountain snowmelt, this simple but brilliant system prevented the entire structure from becoming saturated and simply washing away down the slope. On top of this drainage layer, the builders would add successive strata of progressively smaller materials. A layer of coarse gravel would follow, then finer gravel, then a mix of sand and crushed clay. Each layer was meticulously leveled and compacted, likely by teams of workers tamping it down with heavy stone or wooden tools. This painstaking process created a composite foundation that was incredibly dense and stable. The finer particles of clay, when mixed with water and compacted, would form a nearly waterproof seal on the surface of the foundation, further protecting the roadbed from erosion. The result was a built-in suspension system, a flexible, well-drained, and immensely strong base that could absorb the tremendous seismic shocks of the Andean region and withstand the relentless hydraulic pressure of heavy rains. It is this invisible, deeply intelligent groundwork, this unseen investment in longevity, that explains why so many sections of the Qhapaq Ñan remain perfectly level and intact today, while modern roads nearby crack and crumble. They built for the ages, starting from the ground up. Nowhere is this mastery over stone more visibly impressive than in the soaring retaining walls that line the most vertiginous sections of the high mountain road. These are the Tahuantinsuyu, and they represent the zenith of Inca engineering, a perfect marriage of brute strength and delicate artistry. To walk a path guarded by these walls is to witness the empire's solution to its most dramatic challenge: how to carve a stable, safe highway out of a near-vertical mountainside. The Tahuantinsuyu were not merely functional, they were a statement of permanence, a declaration that human passage would be secured against the mountain's relentless pull. The process began not on the cliff face but in the quarry. Teams of workers would identify suitable outcrops of andesite or granite, and their first task was to liberate massive blocks from the living rock. Their primary technique for this was thermal fracturing, a brilliant application of basic physics. They would build large fires directly against the rock face, heating the stone for hours until it was glowing hot. Then they would swiftly douse the superheated surface with cold water, often from nearby mountain streams. The sudden, violent contraction caused by the thermal shock would create deep fractures and fissures, allowing them to pry loose enormous, manageable blocks using nothing more than bronze-tipped levers and immense amounts of coordinated manpower. Once a block was freed, the real artistry began. Using their heavy stone hammers, the Qhampis, teams of skilled masons, would begin the slow, percussive process of shaping. This was not sculpting in the traditional sense, it was a dialogue with the stone. A mason would carefully study the grain and natural fracture lines of the rock. He would then strike it not to cut, but to persuade, using precisely calculated blows to spall off smaller pieces, gradually reducing the block to the desired form. For the final, most critical stage, creating those famously seamless joints, the technique was even more meticulous. A mason would take the stone destined for a specific gap and, in a process akin to three-dimensional puzzle solving, would slowly lower it onto the stones already in place. The impact would leave a dusty imprint, a perfect map of the high points. He would then grind away just those points using abrasives like sand and water, lower the stone again, check the new imprint, and grind again. This iterative dance of trial and error, repeated countless times, resulted in the iconic polygonal masonry where each stone locks perfectly with its neighbors, their complex, multifaceted faces distributing weight evenly in all directions. The function of these magnificent walls was as dual-purpose as their construction was ingenious. Their most obvious role was structural, to act as a giant brace against the mountain. By building up these immense, deeply founded barriers on the downhill side of the road, the engineers created a reinforced terrace. The wall's own incredible mass and interlocking design resisted the immense lateral pressure of the earth behind it, preventing the entire mountainside from slowly slumping and sliding downslope, effectively halting erosion in its tracks. They turned an unstable slope into a level, durable platform, but their second function was deeply human: safety. On roads that wound along cliffs with drops of hundreds, even thousands of feet, the taka provided a crucial psychological and physical barrier for travelers. For a lone messenger sprinting through the fog, a train of llamas navigating a narrow pass, or soldiers marching in formation, that sheer wall of stone was the only thing separating the secure path from the abyss. It was a silent guardian, a symbol of the Inca state's promise to protect its people, even in the most terrifying and awe-inspiring places its empire could reach. Of course, the most dramatic features of the high mountain road are the places where it simply ceases to be a gentle path and transforms into a colossal staircase ascending directly into the clouds. These monumental stairways represent the Inca solution to geography's ultimate challenge, the sheer, vertiginous slope. They understood that a steep, smooth incline would be treacherous and utterly exhausting for both human travelers and their llama caravans. Their answer was not to avoid these ascents, but to master them through the deliberate, painstaking construction of steps. But to call them mere steps is a profound understatement. These were engineered systems of elevation, designed for endurance, safety, and a surprising degree of ergonomic comfort. In areas of bedrock, the steps were often carved directly into the living stone, a permanent alteration of the mountain itself. Yet in many more places, they were built stone by heavy stone, in a process that mirrored the construction of their great walls. The builders would first create a stable, graded foundation, much like the subgrade of the road itself, to prevent the entire staircase from sliding downhill over time. Then they would set massive, elongated stone blocks as the step risers. These were not small cobbles, they were often large, rectangular slabs of andesite, carefully shaped and fitted to form a solid, unyielding front edge. The tread of the step, the part your foot would actually land on, was then filled with a compacted mixture of gravel and clay, creating a firm, slightly yielding surface that was easier on the feet and legs than solid rock during a long, arduous climb. The true mark of their foresight, however, is visible in the details that many would overlook. Look closely at the sides of these stone steps, and you will often find a subtle but brilliant feature: small, carved channels or carefully placed gaps between the stones. These were not construction errors, they were integrated drainage systems. The Inca engineers knew that during the intense rainy season, a built staircase would act like a steep stream bed, funneling torrents of water down its length with immense erosive force. Without a way to manage this flow, the carefully placed tread infill would be scoured away, and the structural stones underneath could be undermined. These channels allowed water to run off to the sides of the path harmlessly, preserving the integrity of the staircase for centuries. It was a solution that anticipated the problem, a testament to building for perpetuity. Perhaps most impressively, the design of these stairways shows a sophisticated understanding of human movement, an ancient form of ergonomics. The steps were not uniform, monolithic blocks poured from a single mold. The height of each step and the depth of each tread were carefully calculated based on the angle of the slope. On a more gradual incline, the steps might be lower and deeper, allowing for a more natural, walking-like gait that conserved energy. On a near vertical face, the steps would become steeper and narrower, creating a more ladder-like ascent that was safer and required the use of hands for balance. This variation meant that a Chhapaq messenger sprinting up the mountainside with urgent information, or a soldier carrying heavy gear, could maintain a more efficient and less exhausting rhythm. It was a subtle act of compassion woven into the stone, a design philosophy that sought not only to conquer the mountain but to care for the people who had to cross it. Each step, in its unique proportion, tells a story of observation and adaptation, of an engineering culture that measured its success not just in miles conquered, but in human effort saved. Yet for all their brilliance in conquering slopes, the Inca road builders faced their ultimate test when the path simply ran out, halted by a yawning chasm or a raging river far below. In these moments where the mountain fell away into empty air, their engineering philosophy shifted from terraforming to something approaching pure magic, the construction of suspension bridges. These were not mere crossings, they were living, breathing structures woven from grass and faith that danced and sang with the wind. The most famous of these, spanning the Great Qhapaq River, was so breathtaking that the conquering Spaniards, despite their own technological arrogance, could only name it with a mixture of terror and awe. El Puente del Incan, the Bridge of the Inca, believing it to be the work of the devil, for surely no human hand could achieve such a thing. The primary material for these impossible spans was as humble as it was ingenious: iku grass, a tough, resilient native bunch grass that blankets the high Andean plains. The process began with the careful harvesting of this grass, which was then meticulously twisted and braided into increasingly thick ropes. First, individual fibers were spun into slender cords. Then, these cords were woven together into ropes as thick as a man's wrist. Finally, these larger ropes were braided into the main cables, massive structures that could be as thick as a human torso. The entire strength of the bridge depended on the collective strength of thousands upon thousands of these individual grass fibers, their inherent flexibility allowing the entire structure to sway and absorb the tremendous forces of wind and the weight of crossing traffic without snapping. For additional strength and durability in key stress points, leather from llamas or alpacas was also integrated, woven into the cables or used to create the side railings and decking. The construction of a major bridge was a communal spectacle, a ritual of engineering that involved entire villages. The most perilous task was the initial one, getting the first guide rope across the impassable gap. This was often achieved by flying a kite or attaching a light cord to a projectile, though some accounts suggest skilled swimmers may have braved the icy, torrential waters to ferry a line. Once a slender thread connected the two sides, it could be used to pull across progressively heavier ropes until the main cables were in place. These colossal grass ropes were then tensioned and anchored not to simple posts, but to massive, purpose-built stone abutments on either side of the canyon. The stonework here was as precise and durable as any in Cusco, with the cables often secured to great stone rings or cinched around huge stone pylons, their weight and friction locking the entire system in place. A deck of wooden planks or more tightly woven grass matting was then suspended from these main cables, with side railings added for the courage of those who would dare to cross. But a bridge made of organic material, exposed to the harsh Andean elements, was not built to last forever. It was built to be renewed. The Inca system brilliantly addressed this through a mandated maintenance ritual. The responsibility for each bridge was assigned to specific local communities as part of their mita service. Every year, as the dry season began, these communities would undertake the complete replacement of the bridge. Old, weathered cables were taken down and new ones were woven and installed in a ceremony that blended hard labor with deep spiritual significance. This annual renewal was far more than practical upkeep. It was a powerful reaffirmation of community bonds and a tangible demonstration of the Inca ethos of reciprocity and collective responsibility. The bridge did not belong to a king, it belonged to the people, and its continued existence was their sacred duty, a thread of grass that physically and symbolically connected them to each other and to the empire they sustained. To truly grasp the audacity of these woven masterpieces, let us focus on a single, surviving example, the Qhapaq Bridge, a living relic that still spans the Qhapaq River Gorge. This annual renewal is not a tourist spectacle but a profound cultural ritual, a direct inheritance from the Inca era that demonstrates the entire process, from humble grass to a structure capable of supporting human lives. It begins with the harvest of iku grass, the same material used for centuries. Communities gather the long, tough strands, which are then softened by beating them with stones and moistening them to make them pliable. This is the raw, organic beginning of an engineering marvel. The transformation from loose grass to structural cable is a meticulous, multi-stage process of increasing strength. First, individual fibers are deftly twisted together by hand to form thin, strong cords called qhapaq. This twisting is crucial as it multiplies the tensile strength of the individual fragile strands. Next, these cords are themselves twisted together to form a larger rope about the thickness of a human wrist. The final, breathtaking step involves braiding several of these sturdy ropes together to create the massive main cables, each one as thick as a person's torso. The entire strength of the bridge relies on this cumulative principle. Thousands of weak individual fibers, when systematically twisted and woven in unison, create a cable of immense, resilient power. It is a perfect lesson in material science, achieved through centuries of perfected tradition. The most dramatic and perilous phase is the physical construction across the gorge. The old bridge, worn from a year of wind and use, is cut loose and tumbles into the river far below. Now, the master engineers, knowledge passed down through families, take charge. Guided by their ancestors' wisdom, they direct the communal effort. The first, most nerve-wracking task is to get a light guide rope across the chasm. Once this thread is secured, the heavy, hand-braided cables are painstakingly pulled across, an effort requiring the coordinated strength of dozens of people on both sides of the river, heaving in unison. These colossal grass cables are then tensioned and anchored to massive stone pylons on either side of the canyon, which have been used for this purpose for over 500 years. The technique for securing them is ancient and effective. The cables are wound around the stone bases and then cinched tight with smaller ropes, using the immense friction and the weight of the stone itself to hold the entire structure in place. The deck is then woven from smaller ropes and mats, and side railings are added. The final result is a structure that seems impossibly delicate, swaying and singing in the mountain wind, yet is strong enough to support the weight of an entire community crossing it. This annual act is far more than maintenance. It is a physical prayer, a reaffirmation of community bonds, and a living testament to an engineering philosophy that saw infrastructure not as a static object, but as a dynamic, renewable pact between people, their history, and the land they inhabit. While the breathtaking suspension bridges of grass capture our imagination, the Incas' genius for crossing water extended far beyond these woven marvels, adapting with stunning creativity to the unique challenges of their diverse empire. For the vast, open expanse of Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world, a suspended rope bridge was an impossibility. Here, the challenge was not a deep canyon but an endless horizon of water, and the Inca solution was as elegant as it was buoyant, the pontoon bridge. Using the incredibly versatile totora reed, which grows in great abundance in the lake's shallow waters, they engineered floating roadways that connected islands to the mainland and opened up vital trade routes across the water. The construction of these bridges was a masterclass in utilizing local materials. The totora reeds were harvested, dried, and then tightly bound into massive, cylindrical bundles. These bundles, incredibly buoyant and resistant to saturation, were then lashed together side by side to form wide, stable floating platforms. These platforms were anchored in place by being tied to stone weights dropped to the lake bottom, creating a steady, if slightly flexible, causeway that rode the gentle waves of the lake. The entire structure was a living thing, requiring continual maintenance as the reeds on the bottom would eventually become waterlogged. This meant that sections of the bridge were regularly replaced in a cycle of renewal, not unlike that of the grass bridges, ensuring these vital aquatic highways remained open for the merchants, farmers, and officials who depended on them. It was a testament to the Inca ability to not just conquer geography, but to collaborate with it, using the lake's own bounty to bridge its surface. Yet perhaps the most ubiquitous and understated water-crossing technology was not above the water but within it. Scattered along the entire length of the Qhapaq Ñan, often unnoticed by the casual observer, are countless small stone culverts and aqueducts. To an Inca engineer, a small stream or an irrigation canal was not a minor obstacle to be forded. It was a potential threat to the road's longevity. They understood that during the rainy season, a harmless trickle could transform into a raging torrent capable of scouring away months of labor in minutes. Their solution was to build the water directly into the road's design. When a road approached a small waterway, the builders would not simply lay stones across it. Instead, they would construct a small, arched tunnel, a culvert, beneath the roadbed itself. These were crafted from the same impeccably fitted stonework as their great walls, forming a durable, smooth channel that allowed the water to pass freely underneath the highway. This prevented erosion at the road's most vulnerable points and eliminated the need for travelers to make a dangerous and time-consuming wet crossing. In areas where the road ran alongside or needed to cross over larger irrigation canals, they built more substantial aqueducts. These elevated stone channels would carry the watercourse above the level of the path, allowing the flow of people and the flow of water to continue uninterrupted, each on its own designated level. This holistic approach to hydrology reveals a sophisticated understanding of water management that is incredibly advanced for its time. The Inca road builder saw water not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a powerful force to be understood, respected, and accommodated. By designing their infrastructure to work in harmony with the natural drainage of the land, they ensured its survival. These small, thoughtful features, the humble culvert, the functional aqueduct, are the unsung heroes of the road system. They represent a quiet, practical intelligence, a commitment to building something that would last not for years, but for centuries by thoughtfully solving every challenge, no matter how small. Even the most perfectly engineered road is useless without a system to support the people who travel it. For a messenger running at a full sprint or a soldier on a long march, the brutal distances of the Andes required more than just a path. They required sanctuary and supply. The sheer logistical challenge of moving people and goods across thousands of miles of this terrain was solved by the Inca with a second, parallel network of infrastructure, a series of way stations and storehouses that turned a highway into a functioning circulatory system for an empire. Strategically placed along the main routes roughly every 12 to 20 miles, a distance calculated to be a full day's walk for a laden traveler, were the tampas. These were not simple roadside inns but state-built and state-administered way stations, and their standardized presence was a hallmark of Inca organizational genius. Their architecture was purposeful and utilitarian, often taking the form of large, rectangular buildings arranged around a central courtyard. These cancha enclosures provided security, a place to corral llamas, and a sense of community for travelers from across the empire who might find themselves sharing a meal and a fire. Within these walls, imperial officials, traveling nobles, and the army would find shelter, warmth, and basic sustenance as they carried out the business of the state. The design was consistently Spartan but effective, offering protection from the often harsh and unpredictable mountain weather. But the most critical function of the tampu was to serve as a home and relay station for the chasquis, the legendary marathon runners of the empire. These highly trained messengers operated in teams, each one stationed at a tampu and responsible for a specific segment of the road. When a runner approached carrying his quipu, the knotted string recording device, or a verbal message, the next chasqui would be waiting, ready to receive the information and immediately continue the sprint to the next station. This relay system allowed information to travel at a staggering speed of up to 150 miles per day, meaning a message could journey from the empire's distant northern reaches to its capital in Cusco in a matter of days. The tampu was the beating heart of this information superhighway, the fixed point that made this incredible speed and efficiency possible.
ensuring the Qhapaq Inca's commands could reach the farthest corners of his domain with a rapidity that would not be rivaled for centuries. Yet a place to rest was only half of the equation. The empire also needed a place to resupply. Dotting the hillsides above many tampas and strategic points along the road were the Qhapaq's vast complexes of storehouses that served as the empire's pantry, armory, and treasury. Often built on high, windy ridges, their elevated placement was a deliberate cooling mechanism, using the constant Andean breezes as a natural refrigeration system to preserve their contents. These circular or rectangular structures, with their distinctive thatched roofs and ventilation systems, were not merely barns, they were a brilliant solution to the problem of distance and scarcity. The contents of a Qhapaq were a testament to the Inca economy of redistribution. They stockpiled immense quantities of freeze-dried potatoes chuño, dried maize, quinoa, jerky charqui, and other non-perishable goods. But they also held blankets, military equipment like spears and slings, fine cloth, feathers, and even sandals, anything the state might need to support its operations. This system allowed the Inca army to march vast distances without being weighed down by a lengthy supply train. They could simply draw what they needed from these state depots along the way. Furthermore, in times of local famine or hardship, the state could redistribute these stored goods to afflicted communities, solidifying loyalty and demonstrating the tangible benefits of being part of the empire. The Qhapaq transformed the road from a mere route into a lifeline, ensuring that the power of the state, in the form of both its soldiers and its sustenance, could be projected instantly and effectively anywhere it was needed. This entire vast and meticulously engineered network, from the stone-paved highways to the swaying grass bridges, served a single, pulsing purpose: to move information. The Qhapaq Ñan was the physical internet of its day, a continental-scale web of fiber and stone, and its most vital component wasn't built from rock or rope but from flesh and blood. This was the Chasqui network, a human information relay system of such staggering efficiency that it allowed the Inca Emperor in Cusco to dine on fresh fish caught in the Pacific Ocean, and to receive news from the farthest frontier faster than any other ruler on Earth until the invention of the telegraph. The Chasqui himself was the pinnacle of this system, a state-sponsored athlete in service of the empire. These were not ordinary messengers. They were selected as boys for their exceptional speed, endurance, and lung capacity, traits essential for running in the thin air of the high Andes. Their training was rigorous and lifelong, transforming them into human thoroughbreds capable of sprinting at a relentless pace across some of the most difficult terrain on the planet. They were the vital couriers upon whom the entire administrative and military might of the empire depended. The system's genius lay in its relay design. Unlike a lone marathon runner who would eventually collapse from exhaustion, the Chasqui network was a team effort. Along the road, positioned at intervals of roughly 1.5 to 2 miles, a distance a fit runner could cover at a full sprint, were small stone huts known as chasquiwasi, or messenger houses. In these Spartan shelters, the next runner in the chain would always be waiting, warmed by a small fire, listening intently for the signal that his moment had arrived. The approach of a chasqui was often announced by the blowing of a conch shell trumpet or the haunting sound of a pututu, a warning that ricocheted through the mountain passes and signaled the next runner to prepare himself. As the incoming runner dashed into view, the transfer of information was a blur of flawless precision. The message itself could take two forms. The most common was a verbal communique, a memorized report that was passed from one runner to the next like a baton in a relay race that never ended. These runners were trained in a specific, standardized form of Quechua to prevent the message from degrading into a game of telephone across 1,000 miles. The second method involved the quipu, a complex recording device made of colored cords with a series of intricate knots. The runner would physically hand the quipu over to his counterpart, who would immediately launch into his own sprint towards the next chasquiwasi, barely breaking stride.
There was no pause, no rest. The message was in a state of perpetual motion. The speed this system achieved is almost difficult to believe. Estimates suggest that an urgent message could travel up to 150 miles in a single day. This meant that information from Quito, in the northern extreme of the empire, could reach the capital city of Cusco, a distance of over 1,200 miles in under a week. To put that into a modern perspective, that same journey would take a man on horseback, riding hard and changing mounts, nearly 2 weeks. The Inca were achieving information speeds that would not be consistently matched in Europe or North America until the Pony Express and the electric telegraph of the 19th century. This incredible velocity allowed the Qhapaq Inca to govern his sprawling empire with a responsiveness that was simply unimaginable to his contemporaries, reacting to rebellions, natural disasters, and military victories with a speed that made his rule feel omniscient and his power immediate and absolute. Yet for all their incredible speed, the Chasquis would have been mere couriers without the data they carried. Their true purpose was to be the physical vessels for the empire's most revolutionary and enigmatic technology, the quipu. To the untrained eye, a quipu is a bewildering collection of colored cords and knots, a child's craft project or a tangled mess. But to a trained Inca administrator, a Qhapaq Ñan, it was a sophisticated, three-dimensional database, a portable library of information that allowed them to manage an empire spanning thousands of miles without a single page of written text. This was the true code of the roads, the digital heart of the Andes, centuries before the digital age. The structure of a quipu followed a brilliantly logical, hierarchical design. At its core was a primary horizontal cord from which multiple pendant cords were suspended. These main cords could then have their own subsidiary cords dangling from them, creating a branching, tree-like structure capable of organizing information into categories and subcategories. This physical form was the key to its function. A single quipu could track the tax obligations of an entire province, the contents of a warehouse complex, or the census data of a distant valley, all without a single written word. The information was stored in a complex language of knots, and learning to read it required years of specialized training, turning the Qhapaq Ñan into a revered class of scribes and accountants. The code itself was a masterpiece of analog data storage. The type of knot represented a specific numerical value. A figure 8 knot signified the number 1. A long knot with multiple turns could represent numbers from 2 to 9, with the number of turns indicating the value. Most importantly, a complex granny knot represented 0, a mathematical concept the Inca understood and utilized long before it became commonplace elsewhere. But the knots were only part of the story. Their position on the cord was equally critical. Numbers were stored in a base 10 positional system, much like our own. Units were placed closest to the end of the cord, tens were a bit higher up, hundreds above that, and so on. A trained reader could glance at a cord and instantly see a number like 1,234 simply by reading the knots from the top of the cord down. Beyond the numbers, the physicality of the cords themselves carried immense meaning. The color of a cord was not decorative, it was a fundamental part of the data. The vibrant dyes derived from plants, minerals, and insects served as categorical labels. A yellow cord might represent gold, a brown cord could signify potatoes, and a red cord might denote a specific tribe or region. The material mattered, too. A cord made of llama wool could indicate a herd count, while a cotton cord might refer to agricultural produce. Even the spin direction of the thread and the way the cord was attached to the main string could modify the information. This multi-sensory system transformed a simple bundle of string into a dense, multi-layered record, capable of storing logistical, statistical, and demographic data with a precision that astonished the Spanish conquistadors, who eventually came to rely on quipus to administer the very empire they had conquered. The true and still debated mystery lies in whether quipus could encode more than just numbers. Some scholars and modern-day Quechua elders posit that certain types of quippus, known as narrative quippus, may have been used to record stories, laws, genealogies, and even poetry. The complex combinations of color, knot type, and chord structure could, in theory, have served as a system of symbolic notation, a non-alphabetic writing system that we have simply lost the cipher to decode. The road network was the physical medium that made this system viable, allowing these data-packed objects to be swiftly carried from a remote village to a provincial governor and on to the capital, where teams of Qhapaq could compile the information into a comprehensive picture of the entire empire. The quipu was the perfect complement to the road, a lightweight, durable, and information-dense technology that turned the incredible speed of the chasqui into meaningful, actionable intelligence for the state. This mastery over water becomes even more impressive when we examine the road's profile, its subtle shape from side to side. The Inca engineers sculpted the roadbed with a gentle, parabolic curve, a convex crown that rose imperceptibly higher in the center than at the edges. This was not a flat surface. During the fierce downpours of the wet season, this clever design prevented water from pooling in the middle of the path, which would have quickly turned it into a muddy quagmire and begun a relentless process of erosion. Instead, the curved profile acted like a roof, causing the rainwater to instantly sheet off the surface and flow directly into those waiting drainage canals and culverts at the roadside. It was a system of perfect synergy where every element worked in concert to manage the immense hydraulic pressure of the Andean climate. The road itself became a tool for shedding water, its very form an integral part of the drainage solution. This obsession with controlling water extended far beyond just managing rain. In the high, cold Puna grasslands, they faced a different aquatic challenge: boggy, waterlogged ground that could swallow a road whole. Here, the Inca response was to literally raise the highway above the problem. They constructed causeways, building up the roadbed with layers of compacted gravel and stone to create a dry, stable pathway elevated above the saturated earth below. In some of the most challenging, swampy areas, they even employed a technique called fascine, where they would lay down a foundation of woven mats made from tough Andean grasses before building the stone road on top. This created a flexible yet solid base that prevented the structure from sinking into the soft ground, a technique still used in modern civil engineering. Every solution was tailored to the specific hydrological challenge of the locale, demonstrating a localized intelligence that was applied on a continental scale. The ultimate testament to the success of this hydraulic engineering is not in ancient texts but in the enduring stone itself. When you walk a surviving section of the Qhapaq Ñan today, you are not walking on a ruin. You are walking on a functioning piece of 500-year-old infrastructure. The roadbed remains level, the stones are firmly in place, and the drainage channels are still clear and ready to carry away the next storm's deluge. It stands in silent, stark contrast to many modern roads in the region, which frequently wash out, crack, and require constant, expensive repair. The Inca built with an understanding of permanence, and their thoughtful, relentless focus on managing water is the single greatest reason why their legacy remains etched so visibly into the mountainsides, allowing us to trace the contours of their ambition long after their empire faded into history. To view the Qhapaq Ñan as merely a feat of civil engineering is to miss its deepest purpose. For the Inca, these roads were far more than physical infrastructure. They were the sacred arteries of a living, breathing cosmos. The empire was not just a political entity but a spiritual one, and the landscape itself was a temple. The roads were the physical manifestation of this belief, known as sex. Invisible, sacred lines that radiated out from the Coricancha, the sun temple in the heart of Cusco, connecting hundreds of holy shrines known as huacas. A huaca could be anything that held spiritual power: a uniquely shaped boulder, a spring of pure water, a mountain peak that touched the sky, or even an ancient gnarled tree. The roads physically traced these spiritual lines, turning a journey across the empire into a walk through a consecrated geography, where every turn could reveal a place of offering, prayer, and connection to the divine. This intertwining of the physical and spiritual realms transformed travel into pilgrimage. The road was not simply a means to an end, the journey itself was a sacred act. For an Inca citizen, to walk the Qhapaq Ñan was to participate in the order of the universe, to follow paths walked by ancestors and gods. Major destinations were not just administrative centers but powerful spiritual vortices. A pilgrimage to the coastal temple of Pachacamac, the feared and revered creator god who shook the earth, was a journey to the very source of life's energy. The arduous trek to this vast oracle complex, with its towering stepped pyramids overlooking the Pacific, was a transformative experience undertaken to seek guidance, atone for sins, or ask for blessings. The road facilitated this, providing a safe, guided path through the often terrifying and powerful landscape, a literal way to navigate both the external world and one's internal spiritual state. Perhaps no site exemplifies this sacred union of road and destination more than Machu Picchu. We often see it in isolation, a beautiful city in the clouds. But its true magic is unlocked when we consider the journey. For most pilgrims, arriving at Machu Picchu was not a sudden event. The final approach was along a meticulously crafted stone pathway that wound through the cloud forest, building anticipation with every step. The final entrance was designed to be a revelation, passing through the Sun Gate, or in Thai Pungku, at dawn, and witnessing the first rays of sunlight illuminate the sacred city below was a moment of profound spiritual theater. This carefully orchestrated arrival was the culmination of the pilgrimage, a reward for the physical effort that underscored the spiritual significance of the place. The road didn't just lead to Machu Picchu, it was an essential part of the Machu Picchu experience, framing it as the jewel in a crown of sacred geography. This worldview meant that maintaining the road was a religious duty as much as a practical one. The annual renewal of a grass bridge was not just about repairing fibers, it was a ritual that reaffirmed the community's covenant with the gods and with each other. Clearing a landslide from a pathway was an act of piety, ensuring the sects remained open for spiritual energy to flow. The road was a living entity, a thread in the fabric of the cosmos, and its care was essential for maintaining balance and harmony in the world, or what the Inca called Aini. This profound spiritual dimension elevates the Inca achievement from a marvel of engineering to a masterpiece of cultural philosophy. They did not build roads upon the land, they wove their roads into the very soul of the mountain, creating a network that served the body, the state, and the spirit in equal measure. This logistical framework became the ultimate military weapon, transforming the vast geography of the Andes from a defensive liability into an offensive asset. The true genius of the Inca Road network was not just in moving messengers or goods, but in its ability to project sheer, overwhelming force with a speed that stunned their adversaries. For a provincial lord considering rebellion, the most terrifying concept was not the Inca army itself, but its sudden and seemingly miraculous appearance. A revolt that might have taken weeks to be reported to Cusco could be met just days later by a professional, fully supplied army of thousands, materializing as if from the mountains themselves. This was the ultimate expression of Inca power, and it was the Qhapaq Ñan that made it possible. The system functioned with the precision of a well-oiled machine. When news of unrest reached the Sapa Inca, perhaps through the incredibly fast Chasqui system we discussed earlier, the decision to deploy the military would set a colossal mechanism into motion. The core of the Imperial Army was stationed in and around Cusco, a permanent professional force loyal directly to the emperor. Rather than having to march this entire army as one slow, cumbersome mass, the Inca commanders utilized the road network's design to their supreme advantage. They would dispatch advance units at a blistering pace, with smaller, highly mobile groups of soldiers sprinting down the roads to secure key strategic points like mountain passes, bridges, and tampas ahead of the main force. This ensured that the route remained open and secure, preventing rebels from ambushing the army or destroying critical infrastructure. The main body of the army would then follow, moving with an efficiency that was unparalleled in the pre-modern world. Thousands of soldiers, organized into their decimal units of 10, 100, and 1,000, would march in disciplined columns along the wide, paved sections of the Qhapaq Ñan. Their speed was phenomenal. Estimates suggest an Inca army could cover up to 20 miles a day through some of the most difficult terrain on Earth, a pace that would exhaust most modern armies. This was achievable precisely because they carried very little with them. Unlike European armies of the time that dragged massive supply wagons, the Inca soldier traveled light. His personal gear was minimal, and his sustenance came not from a backpack but from the empire itself, drawn from the network of kulkas that lined the route. This is where the logistical planning reached its zenith. The army became a moving entity that fed off the stored wealth of the state depots. As the troops advanced, supply officers would arrive at the kulka complexes perched on the hillsides above the road. There, they would requisition vast quantities of pre-prepared food, lightweight, high-calorie chuño freeze-dried potatoes, dried meat charqui, and maize. They would draw new sandals for soldiers whose footwear had worn out on the arduous stone paths, and they would replenish supplies of sling stones and other munitions. The army did not forage or pillage the local countryside. Such actions would have alienated the very populations they sought to control. Instead, they were sustained by the empire's foresight, a demonstration of benevolent but absolute power. The local populace would witness this perfectly supplied force and understand that resistance was futile. The state's reach was endless and its resources seemingly inexhaustible. This ability to rapidly concentrate force allowed the Inca to fight their wars on their own terms. They could defeat rebellious factions in detail, picking them off one by one before they could unite, because no other group could move armies across such distances so quickly. The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. The knowledge that the emperor in Cusco could reach out and touch any part of his domain with an iron fist within a matter of days was a more powerful deterrent than any single battle. The road network was the ultimate force multiplier, turning the Inca army into a strategic swift response unit that could enforce the will of the state across a continent, ensuring that the four parts of the empire truly remained and were seen to remain forever together. When the Spanish conquistadors first ventured into the high Andes, they entered a world that defied all their European expectations. These men, who prided themselves on the architectural achievements of Rome and the rising glory of Renaissance Europe, found themselves humbled by a sight they could scarcely believe. Their own chronicles, penned in awe, are some of the most powerful testaments we have to the grandeur of the Qhapaq Ñan. Chief among these witnesses was the soldier chronicler Pedro Cieza de León, who traveled thousands of miles along these roads in the years following the conquest. He wrote with a sense of sheer astonishment, declaring that the road over the mountains was so grand and so wonderful that even seeing it with his own eyes, he struggled to believe it could exist. He marveled at the great stone stairs built into the sheer cliffs and the way the roads were dug out of the living rock along the sides of mountains, proclaiming that the Inca Road must be one of the greatest works ever seen in the world. For men like Cieza, these were not the paths of a primitive people. They were the equal of any highway built by the Romans, a comparison they used with the highest respect. This sense of awe, however, was quickly overshadowed by a devastating and tragic irony. The very infrastructure that had been the lifeblood of the Inca Empire became the perfect instrument for its own destruction. The Spanish, led by Francisco Pizarro and his small band of adventurers, did not have to hack their way through treacherous jungles or scale impassable peaks. They simply followed the impeccable Inca roads, which guided them like an arrow straight into the heart of the empire. These wide, smooth highways allowed their horses to move with a speed and ease that would have been impossible on any other route. The same bridges that had connected the four parts together now allowed the invaders to cross deep canyons without delay. The storehouses, the Qhapaq, stocked with food and supplies for the Inca state, now provisioned the very army that sought to dismantle it. The Spanish conquest of the largest empire in the Americas was, in many ways, a journey made possible by the genius of the people they sought to conquer. A cruel twist of fate where the ultimate symbol of Inca power became the pathway to its downfall. After the conquest, the relationship between the new rulers and the old roads shifted from awe to pragmatic use, and finally to neglect. The Spanish colonial administration initially relied heavily on the Qhapaq Ñan. They used it to transport the immense wealth of plundered gold and silver from the highlands to the coast, where galleons waited to carry it to Spain. They continued to use the tampas as way stations and even employed the surviving chasqui runners to carry their own messages, recognizing the unmatched efficiency of the system. But their worldview and their needs were fundamentally different from the Inca. The Spanish were a valley people by culture and preference. They found the high altitudes, the thin air, and the harsh climate of the Andes uncomfortable and unhealthy. They sought to build their new cities, their centers of power and religion, in the more familiar and temperate river valleys and along the coast. This led to a profound shift in infrastructure priorities. The Spanish began building new roads that connected their new cities to each other, often ignoring the high mountain routes that had been the empire's spine. They introduced wheeled carts and wagons, which required gentler grades and wider turns than the Inca stairways and narrow mountain paths could accommodate. Slowly, entire sections of the Qhapaq Ñan, particularly the breathtaking high mountain passes, began to fall into disuse. Without the annual mita labor tax to maintain them, the infrastructure that had been so carefully renewed for generations began to decay. Drainage channels clogged with debris, retaining walls slowly slumped without care, and the brilliant grass bridges, once replaced in annual community rituals, were allowed to rot and collapse, severing vital connections across canyons. The Spanish saw the roads not as a sacred trust to be maintained for the good of all, but as a resource to be used until it was no longer convenient. The decay was not sudden, but a gradual fading, a forgetting, as the new rulers turned their backs on the mountains and the magnificent web of stone that connected them, allowing one of humanity's greatest engineering achievements to be reclaimed by the very earth it had so brilliantly conquered. For centuries after the Spanish turned their backs on the high Andes, the great stone roads of the Inca faded from the world's memory, slowly succumbing to a quiet conquest by the land they had once tamed. The Qhapaq Ñan did not vanish, it merely slept, its paved sections buried by landslides, its retaining walls embraced by twisting roots, and its sacred paths forgotten by all but the most isolated highland communities. The story of its modern rediscovery is a tale of patient dedication, beginning not with satellites, but with the relentless curiosity of a few intrepid explorers who refused to believe that such a marvel could be lost forever. One of the most pivotal figures in this revival was the American explorer and historian Hiram Bingham. When he first stumbled upon the vine-choked splendor of Machu Picchu in 1911, he was, in fact, following an ancient Inca roadway. Though he is celebrated for bringing the lost city to global attention, it was the road that led him there, a testament to the fact that even the grandest Inca sites were merely nodes within a far vaster network. Bingham's photographs and writings sparked a new wave of interest, but for decades, the full scope of the road system remained a ghost on the map, a legend whispered among archaeologists. The challenge of finding these roads is immense. From the ground, what might look like a simple footpath worn by generations of llama herders could, upon closer inspection, reveal itself as something far more deliberate. Archaeologists became detectives of the landscape, learning to read subtle clues. a line of stones that seems too regular, a gentle embankment where the land slopes too perfectly, or the faint trace of a drainage culvert peeking through the soil. These are the fingerprints of the Qhapaq Ñan Camayoc. The high mountain routes exposed to wind and frost are often easier to spot, their stonework stubbornly enduring. But in the cloud forests on the eastern slopes of the Andes, the jungle is a relentless adversary. Here, the roads disappear under a blanket of moss and thick vegetation, their outlines visible only as faint, linear depressions that can be walked over without ever being seen. For generations, mapping the Qhapaq Ñan was a process of painstaking meter-by-meter exploration, piecing together a continental puzzle with fragments of evidence. This slow, meticulous work was revolutionized by the advent of a remarkable technology, LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Imagine being able to strip away an entire forest canopy with the push of a button, revealing the shape of the earth hidden beneath. That is the power of LiDAR. Mounted on aircraft, these laser scanners fire millions of light pulses toward the ground. By measuring the time it takes for each pulse to bounce back, they create an incredibly detailed, three-dimensional map of the terrain surface, effectively rendering trees and undergrowth invisible. This technology has been a game-changer for Inca archaeology. In recent years, LiDAR surveys have revealed vast, unknown sections of the road network, including entire hidden highways and intricate terraces that were completely invisible to ground observers. It has confirmed the suspected routes of the Inca and revealed astonishing new ones, showing how the roads often branched and intertwined in a system even more complex than previously imagined. The true scale that is now emerging is staggering. We once spoke of the Qhapaq Ñan as a 25,000-mile system. Modern archaeological surveys, bolstered by this aerial reconnaissance, suggest the network may have been even more extensive. The roads did not just connect major cities, they spider-webbed across the empire, linking minor administrative centers, sacred shrines, and remote agricultural zones. This new understanding deepens our appreciation for the Incas' logistical genius. It wasn't just about getting from the capital to the provinces, it was about integrating every single corner of their diverse realm into a cohesive whole. The work of archaeologists like John Hislop, who dedicated his life to walking and documenting the roads, provided the foundational knowledge. Now, technologies like LiDAR are building upon that foundation, allowing us to see the system with a god's-eye view, confirming that the Inca achievement was, if anything, even greater than we ever knew. Each new scan, each newly discovered stretch of pavement, is a silent tribute to the engineers who looked upon the most formidable landscapes on Earth and saw not obstacles but pathways. And yet, despite centuries of silence and the slow reclamation by the Earth, the spirit of the Qhapaq Ñan was never truly extinguished. In a few remarkable places, the ancient knowledge did not need to be rediscovered by archaeologists because it was never lost. It was kept alive, passed down from father to son, from mother to daughter, in a continuous, unbroken chain of memory and practice. This living heritage finds its most powerful and beautiful expression in a single, annual event that transforms a deep canyon in the Peruvian highlands into a stage for one of the most profound engineering rituals on the planet, the renewal of the Qhapaq Bridge. Every year, during the second week of June, 4 communities from the Qhapaq district gather at the steep banks of the Apurimac River. For them, this is not a historical reenactment. It is a vital, mandated responsibility, a pact made with their ancestors and with each other. The event is a 4-day festival of communal labor, prayer, and celebration, recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The first day is dedicated to preparation and prayer. The families arrive and camp near the old bridge, and the master builders, the Chacacamayocs, who inherited their sacred role from their fathers, make offerings of coca leaves and corn beer to the Apus, the mountain spirits, and to Pachamama, Mother Earth. They ask for permission to harvest the grass and for protection during the dangerous work ahead. Only after these blessings are given does the work begin, with men and women heading to the high plains to gather great bundles of the tough Kuoya grass. The second day is when the transformation from raw material to structural cable truly begins. The entire community, men and women, young and old, sits together on the canyon rim, twisting the grass into the slender cords called Qhapaq. This act of twisting is the fundamental alchemy of the process, where fragile individual strands are wound together into something stronger. These small cords are then woven together into the larger ropes, and finally, 6 massive main cables are braided by teams of men working in unison, their rhythmic pulling and weaving a physical symphony of coordinated effort. Meanwhile, the old bridge, which has served its purpose for a year, is cut loose and sent falling into the river below, a symbolic severing of the old to make way for the new. On the third day, the most daring phase commences. The new cables, incredibly heavy and cumbersome, are carefully maneuvered down the canyon wall. The most experienced builders, working without safety harnesses, brave the dizzying heights to secure the guide ropes. Then, in a breathtaking display of coordinated strength, the communities on both sides of the gorge begin to pull. They haul the enormous main cables across the gap, heaving in unison, their chants and shouts echoing off the stone walls. Once across, the cables are tensioned and anchored to the ancient stone pylons, using the same techniques and hitches that have been employed for half a millennium. The deck and the side railings are then woven into place, completing the structure. The fourth and final day is one of celebration and inauguration. The new bridge is tested, first by the builders walking across it, and then by the entire community in a joyful festival. There is music, dancing, and a shared feast, a celebration of a successful renewal and a reaffirmation of their shared identity and responsibility. This annual ritual is far more than just maintenance. It is the physical preservation of a cultural memory. It is a testament to the fact that the greatest legacy of the Inca roads is not the stone itself, but the communal spirit, the shared knowledge, and the profound connection to the land that made their construction possible in the first place. The Qhapaq Bridge is not a relic. It is a living, breathing monument to the fact that some threads woven from grass and faith can never be broken. For all their legendary precision and foresight, the Inca engineers were not infallible deities of stone, but masterful problem solvers working in one of the most dynamic and volatile landscapes on Earth. Their success was not defined by never failing, but by their profound capacity to learn from failure and adapt their designs in an ongoing dialogue with the mountains. The Andes are a living, shifting entity, and even the most perfectly constructed road could not always withstand the raw, tectonic power of a massive earthquake or a catastrophic landslide triggered by torrential rains. Evidence of these challenges is etched into the landscape itself, if you know where to look. In certain remote highland passes, archaeologists have discovered sections of the Qhapaq Ñan that lie buried under immense piles of scree and rubble, clear testament to a rockslide of such force that it overwhelmed even the strongest retaining walls. In other areas, particularly on the steep, unstable eastern slopes descending into the Amazon basin, entire routes were simply abandoned. The road builders, after a relentless battle against constant erosion and slumping earth, made a calculated decision to reroute the path to a more stable ridge, leaving the old, compromised section to be slowly claimed by the cloud forest. These are not signs of poor engineering, they are markers of intelligent adaptation. This process of learning is visible in the subtle evolution of their construction techniques. In regions prone to frequent minor earth tremors, we see a clear development in their masonry. The iconic polygonal walls, with their complex, interlocking joints, are famously earthquake-resistant because the stones can shift and settle without collapsing. But in areas where early, simpler walls had failed during seismic events, later Inca builders refined this technique to an even higher degree. they began selecting stones with more complex, almost puzzle-like shapes and often incorporated larger cornerstone blocks known as keystones that would act as anchors for the entire structure. They learned that by increasing the complexity of the joints, they distributed the seismic forces more evenly, allowing the wall to dance during a quake rather than fracture. This was an engineering principle refined through observation and experience, a direct response to the environment's feedback. Perhaps the most telling adaptations are found in their drainage systems. A brilliant design on paper could still be defeated by an unprecedented weather event. There are locations where the original drainage culverts, perfectly adequate for average rainfall, were clearly enlarged by later work crews. The evidence is in the stonework itself, a neatly cut original channel, later expanded with a slightly different style of masonry to increase its water-carrying capacity. This indicates that after a particularly severe rainy season, perhaps one that caused localized flooding and damage to the roadbed, engineers returned to the site, diagnosed the problem, and implemented a solution. They understood that their work was part of a perpetual cycle of maintenance and improvement. The annual renewal of the Qhapaq Bridge is the ultimate expression of this philosophy, a built-in acceptance that materials degrade and systems must be refreshed. This adaptive mindset, this humility in the face of nature's power, is what ultimately secured the long-term survival of their network. They built with the wisdom to know that perfection was not a static achievement, but a continuous process of listening to the land and responding with ingenuity. Their greatest triumph was not avoiding failure altogether, but creating a resilient system that could absorb shocks, learn from them, and endure for centuries. To fully appreciate the scale of the Inca accomplishment, it is illuminating to place it on a global stage alongside the other legendary road builders of antiquity, the Romans. Both empires forged networks that were the marvels of their age, yet they were products of vastly different worlds, philosophies, and challenges. Their approaches, from foundational techniques to ultimate purpose, reveal not a competition for superiority, but a fascinating study in parallel innovation. The Romans, masters of the Mediterranean basin, and the Incas, conquerors of the Andes, devised astonishingly effective solutions to the same fundamental problem of connection, yet their paths to success could not have been more different. The most striking divergence lies in their very philosophy of the path. Roman engineering was an act of domination over the landscape. Their legendary roads are famous for their breathtaking straightness, often marching relentlessly across the countryside, cutting through hills and bridging valleys with an unwavering determination. This was a deliberate display of power, a statement that the will of Rome would not be deterred by mere geography. It projected an image of unstoppable, linear order. The Inca approach was one of harmony and adaptation. Their roads, as we've seen, weave and contour with the mountains. They respected the terrain, working with its natural lines of force rather than against them. A Roman engineer saw a mountain and thought of cutting through it. An Inca engineer saw the same mountain and thought of crafting a staircase or a retaining wall to embrace it. This was not a sign of technological inferiority, but a reflection of a different worldview, one that sought balance with an environment that was far more vertically extreme and seismically active than anything the Romans ever faced. This philosophical split is crystallized in their construction materials. Roman roads are a masterpiece of layered composition and chemical bonding. Their technique involved digging a deep trench, laying a foundation of large stones, followed by layers of rubble, gravel, and sand, all capped with large, flat paving stones. The genius of their system often relied on the use of mortar, a mixture of lime, sand, and water that set into a hard, concrete-like mass, locking everything into a monolithic, rigid slab. This created an incredibly durable, flat surface ideal for the rapid movement of wheeled vehicles, from supply carts to chariots. Inca construction, by stark contrast, was a symphony of dry stone masonry. They used no mortar whatsoever. Their strength came from the unparalleled precision of their stone fitting, where each rock was painstakingly shaped to interlock with its neighbors in a dynamic, flexible matrix. This was not a single slab, but a cohesive membrane that could shift and settle without cracking, a crucial innovation in an earthquake-prone region where a rigid Roman road would have quickly shattered. The Roman road was a triumph of mass and mixture, while the Inca road was a triumph of precision and patience. The core purpose of each network also shaped its form. The Roman road system, the Via Romani, was first and foremost an instrument of military conquest and administration. Its primary purpose was to allow the legions to march swiftly to trouble spots, to secure newly acquired territory, and to facilitate the efficient collection of taxes and resources from provinces to feed the insatiable engine of the empire. It was a system designed for expansion and control, with the army as its primary user. The Inca Qhapaq Ñan, while also used by the military, served a more holistic function as the central nervous system of integration. Its purpose was to bind together the four quarters of a pre-existing empire, connecting incredibly diverse ecological zones and cultures. It was as vital for moving subsistence goods like maize and potatoes from fertile valleys to highland communities as it was for moving troops. It facilitated the movement of people on state business, the pilgrimage of citizens to sacred sites, and the relay of information. If the Roman road was a military spearhead, the Inca road was a circulatory system designed to nourish and unify every part of the body politic. Finally, their legacies, while both profound, manifest differently in the modern world. The immense, durable structure of Roman roads often meant that their routes became the foundation for countless modern highways and roads across Europe. You can still drive on routes first paved 2,000 years ago. Their legacy is one of direct physical continuity beneath our wheels. The Inca legacy is more subtle yet equally enduring. Vast sections of the Qhapaq Ñan were abandoned and forgotten, not to be rediscovered until centuries later. Their lasting impact is not beneath our asphalt, but in the lessons they offer. In an age increasingly concerned with sustainability and resilience, Inca engineering stands as a timeless lesson in building in harmony with the environment, using local materials, and creating infrastructure that is flexible and adaptive. They demonstrate that the most advanced solution is not always the one that imposes its will with the most force, but the one that listens to the land and responds with intelligent, elegant ingenuity. Beyond their undeniable practical genius for conquering terrain, the roads of the Inca whisper of a purpose that transcends mere engineering. They hint at a world where the physical and spiritual were inseparable, where a path was not just a route for travel but a line of sacred energy connecting earth to sky. This leads us to one of the most captivating and debated mysteries surrounding the Qhapaq Ñan. Was the entire colossal network laid out according to a grand celestial or geodetic design? Were these roads, in their sweeping courses across the continent, part of a vast cosmological map etched into the very flesh of the Andes? The heart of this theory lies in the Incas' profound and sophisticated understanding of astronomy. Theirs was a civilization that meticulously observed the heavens, tracking the movements of the sun, moon, stars, and planets with a precision that allowed them to create a complex ceremonial calendar. They built elaborate observatories like the iconic stone Intihuatana or hitching post of the sun at Machu Picchu, used to precisely mark the solstices and equinoxes. This deep celestial knowledge was not abstract. It was directly woven into the fabric of their daily life, agriculture, and religion. The sun, in Thai, was their divine progenitor, and its journey across the sky dictated the rhythms of planting, harvest, and celebration. It is within this context that the idea of astronomically aligned roads becomes so compelling. Certain long, straight stretches of the Qhapaq Ñan, particularly those radiating out from the sacred capital of Cusco, appear to be oriented with breathtaking precision. Some researchers point to specific road segments that align perfectly with the point on the horizon where the sun rises on the June solstice, the shortest day of the year in the southern hemisphere, and a moment of immense sacred significance. This was not just a symbolic gesture, it would have created a spectacular celestial event. On that specific morning, a traveler standing at a particular point on the road would witness the sun cresting the horizon and appearing to rise directly along the paved avenue, as if the road itself was a channel for the sun's first light, a tangible connection between the people and their god. The concept extends beyond solar alignments to the very mountains themselves. The Andes are not just a geological feature to the Inca, they are Apu's powerful living deities. Many scholars argue that the roads were deliberately routed to create direct sightlines to specific, venerated mountain peaks. A journey along such a path would be a constant pilgrimage, with the sacred summit of a mountain like Osangate or Salcante always in view, acting as a spiritual beacon and a permanent reminder of the divine presence presiding over the empire. This system of sacred sightlines is part of a broader concept known as sex, the invisible spiritual lines that connected hundreds of temples and shrines, or huacas, around Cusco. It is a short, logical step to propose that the physical roads themselves were the tangible, walkable expressions of these holy pathways, charting a sacred geography across the land. However, this captivating theory is not without its skeptics and challenges. The primary counterargument is one of sheer pragmatism and scale. The Inca were consummate pragmatists. Their entire engineering philosophy was based on finding the most efficient and sustainable route. To suggest that they would divert a 25,000-mile network, often through impossible terrain, solely to hit an astronomical target seems, to some, to contradict their brilliant practicality. The most efficient path between 2 points in the Andes is almost never a straight line, and it is argued that the observed alignments could be coincidental, a natural byproduct of routing roads along the most stable ridgelines, which often run north-south, parallel to the mountain range itself. Proving intentionality is the great challenge, as the Inca left no written records explaining their surveyors' intentions. Perhaps the most satisfying perspective lies not in choosing one theory over the other, but in synthesizing them. It reflects the beautiful, holistic Inca worldview, where practicality and spirituality were not opposing forces but two sides of the same coin. An Inca road engineer would not have seen a contradiction between choosing the most geologically stable route and ensuring that route also paid homage to a sacred mountain or a solstice sunrise. For them, the most efficient path was, by definition, the one that existed in harmony with the celestial and spiritual order of the universe. A road that avoided landslide-prone slopes and aligned with the winter solstice sun was simply a perfect road. This dual-purpose thinking transforms the Qhapaq Ñan from a mere transportation network into something far more profound, a massive, interactive instrument of cosmology. It was a system that allowed one to navigate not only through physical space from valley to peak, but also through sacred time, connecting the journey of a traveler to the eternal cycles of the heavens. Whether every mile was precisely plotted by the stars may remain a mystery, but the very fact that the question is so compelling speaks to the depth of the Inca achievement. They built in a way that invites us to look deeper, to see the world not just as rock and dirt, but as a place imbued with meaning, where every path tells a story that is both profoundly human and wondrously divine. This profound connection to history is not locked away in a museum or buried in a library. It is a living path you can walk with your own feet. For countless travelers from around the world, the ultimate way to understand the Inca Road is to experience it directly, to become part of its story for a few days by hiking the legendary Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. This journey is far more than a scenic trek. It is a pilgrimage across a still-functioning piece of the empire, a powerful, tangible immersion into the world of the Qhapaq Ñan. Your journey begins not at a trailhead but at a checkpoint, a modern necessity to preserve this fragile heritage. As you set foot on the path, the first thing that strikes you is the unmistakable texture under your boots. This isn't a dirt trail worn down by centuries of hikers. You are walking on the original stone paving laid over 500 years ago. Each step connects you to the countless messengers, soldiers, and pilgrims who walked this exact same route. The stones are worn smooth in the center by ages of passage, yet their impeccable fitting remains a testament to the builder's skill. You quickly learn to watch your step, not just for the uneven surface, but to appreciate the subtle genius of its construction. The gentle crown that sheds rainwater, the small drainage channels that still function perfectly after all this time. The trail is a relentless teacher of Inca principles. It immediately demonstrates their philosophy of contouring the land rather than fighting it. The path weaves and switchbacks with an elegant logic, and as you begin the first of many ascents, you encounter the legendary stairways. Each step is unique, its height and depth carefully calculated for the slope it conquers. You feel this intelligent design in your own body. The rhythm of the climb, though challenging, feels intentional, a physical echo of the ergonomic care the Inca engineers built into their infrastructure. It is exhausting, yes, but it is a manageable exhaustion, a testament to a design meant for human endurance. As you climb higher, the true scale of their ambition reveals itself in the infrastructure that surrounds you. You pass through the intact gateways of ancient Tampas, the way stations that once housed the imperial runners. Standing within the stone walls of a place like Patalacta, a major administrative center terraced into a mountainside, you can almost hear the echoes of its past life. You see the outlines of storehouses, residential quarters, and ceremonial platforms, and the road's role as a lifeline snaps into sharp, unforgettable focus. This was not a remote wilderness trail. It was a busy arterial route, a place of rest and resupply, and now it offers you a moment of rest, a chance to drink water and appreciate the same breathtaking views its original travelers did. The culmination of this journey is a moment of pure, engineered revelation. After days of trekking through cloud forest and over high passes, you arrive in the pre-dawn darkness at the final summit, the Sun Gate, or in Qhapaq. This was not merely an entrance, it was a carefully designed theatrical stage for the most important arrival in the empire. As the first rays of sunlight begin to paint the sky, you stand where only a chosen few would have stood in antiquity. Then, as the mist slowly burns away, the city of Machu Picchu is unveiled below you, perfectly framed by the gate, the morning light catching its terraces and temples. This heart-stopping vista was the intended experience, a reward for the arduous journey, a spiritual and visual payoff meticulously orchestrated by the Inca. In that moment, the road and the destination fuse into a single, profound idea. You understand that the city was not meant to be stumbled upon. It was meant to be approached with effort and reverence along a path that was itself a sacred prelude. Hiking the Inca Trail is more than a vacation. It is a physical conversation with the past, a walk across a bridge of stone that connects our modern world of wonder directly to the enduring genius of an empire that mastered the mountains. And so, after journeying across the high passes and through the cloud forests, after exploring the woven bridges and the silent storehouses, we are left with the quiet, enduring testimony of the stone itself. The Qhapaq Ñan stands as a monument to a civilization that achieved the extraordinary with the seemingly ordinary, a reminder that our greatest triumphs are not always measured in the height of our skyscrapers or the speed of our processors, but in the wisdom of our connection to the world. The true legacy of this road network is a profound lesson in sustainability, resilience, and intelligent design, carved into the very spine of a continent. We have seen its breathtaking scale, a web of pathways long enough to encircle the globe, stitching together deserts, mountains, and jungles into a single, cohesive empire. We have marveled at the ingenious, low-tech engineering solutions, the dry stone masonry that dances with earthquakes, the subgrade drainage systems that have outlasted centuries of rain, the stairways carved with an ergonomic understanding of the human body. This was not brute force applied to nature, but a deep and respectful collaboration with it. The road builders did not conquer the Andes, they conversed with them, learning the language of the land and responding with elegant, enduring solutions. The annual renewal of the Qhapaq Bridge is the ultimate symbol of this philosophy. Infrastructure not as a static object, but as a living, breathing relationship between a community and its environment, maintained through shared knowledge and collective responsibility. Beyond the physical engineering, the Qhapaq Ñan was the very lifeline of the Inca world. It was the central nervous system that allowed for the incredible speed of the Chasqui messengers, the logistical miracle of the army's movement, and the economic redistribution that sustained millions. It wove the four parts together not just with stone and rope, but with information, sustenance, and power. And perhaps most beautifully, it was imbued with a sacred dimension, a physical manifestation of the sex system that connected the empire not only geographically but cosmologically. To walk these paths was to journey through a landscape alive with spiritual meaning, where a sunrise might align with a solstice and a mountain peak was a revered apu. This holistic integration of the practical and the spiritual is perhaps the Inca's most timeless gift, a model of seeing the world as an interconnected whole. The Qhapaq Ñan silent stones ask us to reconsider our own definitions of progress. In an age of complex machinery and rapidly obsolescent technology, the road stands as a testament to the power of observation, patience, and community. Its brilliance lies not in the complexity of its tools, for they had no iron, no wheel, no written language, but in the profound depth of their understanding. They looked at a mountain and saw a path. They looked at a canyon and saw a bridge woven from grass. They looked at a continent and saw a network of connection. This enduring masterpiece, now an UNESCO World Heritage Site, is a heritage that belongs to all of humanity. It invites us to look closer at the landscapes we traverse, to appreciate the ancient marvels that still exist under our feet and all around us, waiting to share their quiet, powerful stories of what we can achieve when we build in harmony with our world.